Before I moved to Australia, I asked all my friends and family back at home the exact same thing. Is Australia actually safe? And they all gave me the exact same answer. All the snakes and spiders are a bit scary, watch out for the crocs, but apart from that, everything's fine. And I have to admit, it all felt a little bit surface level to me. So after living here for over a year and a half and being married to an Aussie, I've discovered what safety is really like here in Australia for me. And also what no one will tell you in these generic conversations you'll have with your loved ones back at home. Because I've discovered that if you rely on what people normally say about Australia, you'll miss all the really important stuff that affects you day to day. So let's get into it. And hey mate, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Sam, a British actor documenting my journey of rebuilding life here in Australia. So starting with street safety, I want to touch on how safe you feel at night. This first thing completely surprised me, and it was very subtle, that when I was walking around the streets of Brisbane here in Australia at night time on my own, I felt so relaxed. Now I grew up in the small Cotswolds town of Cheltenham, and it's very postcard pretty. It's got that mixture of town life and countryside life. And then I moved to London with my wife who's Aussie, and that was a whole different playing field. Even as a guy, which I know it's much easier for me, I just felt so uncomfortable at night time in London because there's lots of characters. But what I slowly realised about Australia is that it's not about statistics that you might see online. It's about the feeling you get being here. It's about the atmosphere, it's about the people around you. And in Australia, for me, there just feels like there's less edge, less constantly being on alert mode, constantly. And it also feels like that in Australia, people aren't sizing you up all the time. I feel like people aren't constantly staring at me. And then when people do come up to you, they often want to have a nice chat with you. And once you notice that difference, it really changes how you live here. It changes when you go out, it changes how long you stay out for and how much fun you have. And I tell you what, I'm having so much more fun living in Australia because of feeling so safe. But also the UK, it's a gorgeous place to live, and there are some towns and some cities in the UK that are wonderful to live in and you'll have a great time. So it's not dangerous wherever you go, you just have to have your wits about you. Now if any of this is resonating with you, make sure to hit that like button. But none of this means anything if my wife doesn't feel safe. So point number 2, how my wife actually feels living in Australia. Now she's a born and raised Brizzy girl, and there was a moment that really stuck with me when I asked her, do you feel safer, getting the bus or train home at night in the UK or here in Brisbane, Australia? And she said, Australia all the way, because I'm not just talking about London. I've spent a slither of my life living in London. The rest of the time I've lived in what looks like really picturesque, lovely parts of the UK. And Maddie has been there with me for a lot of that adventure, and she still feels so much safer here in Australia, not only for some of the things that I mentioned, but because she doesn't get stared at anywhere near as much. In fact, I don't think she's been catcalled once in Australia, and less of that just background discomfort you have to deal with if you're a woman living in a big city. Of course, even though I'm married to an Aussie, I could never fully understand what it's like to be in my wife's shoes. But I'm just so grateful that she's feeling so much more comfortable here, because if she's not feeling comfortable, I'm not feeling comfortable. It's just stressful for both of us. Because it's not just the streets you need to be mindful, it's also point number 3, public transport and shared spaces. Public transport here is quietly reinforcing a new feeling for me. The buses, the trains, the ferries, they're all such a pleasant experience to get on. When you get on, the staff say hello to you, especially on the ferries. You'll have like 3 different people. Someone recognized me from this YouTube channel actually. I think his name was Matt. So thank you, Matt. You seem like an awesome person. And if you've got any questions, people immediately help you. They don't roll their eyes and sigh and, like it's the biggest effort. People want to actually make sure that you know where you're going and what you're doing. Do we always feel safe? Not always. I mean, sometimes there are a few things that happen that were like, that was a bit dodgy. But on the whole, it's pretty good. But I'm very aware that I might be sounding very overly positive about Australia. So let's talk about some of the actual safety dangers and move on to the weather section. So point number 4, storms and flooding. So this was my blind spot completely. We do get flooding in the UK, but nowhere near as much as Australia. We do get a bit of bad weather, but we don't get full-on massive thunderstorms that like blow all of your garden furniture away. Coming from the Cotswolds, I'd never really experienced a storm, like a serious storm, until I came to Australia. And then I'm hearing the thunder, like whip crack, like it feels like it's right above my head. It's so loud that I think at one point I've dropped to the ground because I've been so scared, and that's really embarrassing to admit. Now, I thought the weather was always good in Australia. That's one of the myths I've been brought up to believe in the UK. So experiencing the constant thunderstorms that you get in Queensland in summer, it's hectic. It's kind of exciting. I kind of love it. As long as everyone's safe and everyone's sheltered, I kind of like being inside, seeing the lightning, hearing the thunder, the immersive experience. But if you're out on the road driving, it is completely stressful. Sometimes you have to pull over because your windshield is just covered in water. And then talking about the floods, Australia can just get bucket loads of rain at once, and it creates flash flooding because there's so many creeks and rivers in Australia especially. So when you get this flash flooding, they all just fill up, they spill over into the flat plains, they spill over into people's homes. It's awful. And I must admit, I came into Australia with British cockiness, with arrogance, thinking I'm as hard as nails, I can handle a bit of bad weather, I'm British. And I realised British bad weather does not equal Australian bad weather. Australian bad weather is like final boss level. And so it's completely changed how I respect the environment here. Also, if you want the 3-minute version of how I'm rebuilding my life here in Australia as a Brit, well, I actually have a free weekly newsletter. You can scan the QR code here, or it's the top link in the description below. And so once you start thinking that way, you start thinking of the other risks that might be happening, like point number 5, bushfires. Now, I think wherever you're from, we all know how serious bushfires in Australia can be, especially because back in the UK, we actually get the news reports of the big Aussie bushfires. Now, as a runner and an actor who films a lot outdoors, I spend a lot of time in bushland here in Australia. It's so beautiful, it's calming, it makes for the best peaceful run where, you won't be bothered by all of the hustle and bustle of, city streets. But the stories that you hear about bushfires can stick with you for a very long time, because sometimes when people are in a dense area of bushland and a bushfire starts, maybe it's coming from one side, it can suddenly surround you. You can get caught in it and you can't get out. It's really awful, and that's what often happens to a lot of the wildlife. Roads get closed and this fire can spread rapidly. And while I've never experienced a bushfire in person, I've heard from other Aussies about how everything can look completely normal. Blue skies, it's, green trees, everything's gorgeous, and then suddenly everything changes. And it's not something that should make you feel anxious about visiting Australia, not at all. And it's good to be alert, to keep a nice awareness of it. And if you get one of those heat weather warnings on your phone, maybe it's best to avoid bushland for that day. But none of what I've talked about so far could have prepared me for point number 6, cyclones. I didn't even know what a cyclone was. My first proper year living in Australia, the start of last year, I experienced Cyclone Alfred, which hit the southeast part of Queensland, and it was terrifying. A lot of people will probably say, oh, that wasn't even that bad, you should have seen this one back in this year. And I believe it, because thankfully our apartment we were in was raised, so we were, I'd like to think, safe from flash flooding. But also, nothing got broken, the windows didn't explode, our roof wasn't torn off, it was fine. Now, cyclones frighten me in a way that I wasn't prepared for, and I've done my Gold Duke of Edinburgh expedition on the Devonshire moors. And I didn't realise that these cyclones are so powerful, how they can literally tear up people's homes from the ground up and blow your entire roof and the contents of your house out into the open just in minutes. I also didn't realise that the danger isn't just to you, your family and your contents of your home. It's also that the clean drinking water can be ripped out of the city. It's that you might go without electricity. It's that all the shops shut when a cyclone is coming. All the businesses will shut and everyone's hunkering down to keep safe. And I witnessed all of this, and it was really bizarre seeing it. But let's go over to the part that tourists assume is the most dangerous, the wildlife section. So point number 7, inside the house. Inside my house, it's not uncommon for me to find a massive huntsman spider somehow found its way into, my bedroom, my bathroom. And I have to admit, the first few times I saw a huntsman spider, I was petrified. The first time I saw one was in the car park of a Baskin Robbins, and not only did I see it, it saw me, and for some reason started running towards me. And then I thought, surely you're not friendly. But after getting a lot of helpful advice from this lovely community, I realised that Huntsman spiders, they're often your friends, not your enemy, because they'll eat a lot of the annoying insects that you'll get inside of your house, like cockroaches, and basically they kind of take care of your house, like your own little cleaning janitor, I don't know. So when I'm walking around my house, I'm not worried that if, I open the toilet lid, or if I open my wardrobe, or the laundry cupboard, that a big venomous spider or snake is going to jump out and kill me. I'm not worried about that. I also think Australian homes are really built well for it. In Queensland, you'll find that every window and door comes with a fly screen, so not even mosquitoes can get in that, let alone anything bigger, so you're pretty much okay. But the real test of this mindset is when you actually leave the house, because point number 8, let's talk about in the bush. That's not a euphemism. In the bush, I think about wildlife all the time. So many innuendos here, but I just don't panic about it. Not like my first ever run through bushland a few years ago, just getting into this dense corridor of like foliage and then hearing an overwhelmingly loud sound of different bugs and animals, and I thought I was just gonna get consumed by the forest. But you just stay aware, you stay alert, you watch where you step. You don't do anything stupid like wandering off the beaten path unless you know what you're doing, but you have to get on with your life here, because if you worried that every step you were gonna take, a big spider or snake's gonna strangle you, you wouldn't get anything done, you wouldn't have a good time here, and you'd never leave your house, which would be such a shame. Which brings us on to the animals that no one's worried about back in the UK, but Aussies have to be cautious of, which is point 9, mammals and semi-aquatic reptiles. Now we all know when I say a semi-aquatic reptile, I'm talking about a crocodile. Okay. And these are the sorts of animals that people do treat a bit more seriously here. Crocodiles exist more in the northern part of the continent, so not where I live. Now, Aussies, they're not worried about, kangaroos and koalas and some of the mice and things like that. Kangaroos are really chill if you leave them alone. If you respect them, they'll respect you. Same with koalas. But hanging out with other Australians, they have mentioned, to be really respectful of mammals, because, if you don't respect them, if you try and get into their personal space a bit too much, you can get attacked by one. But what really struck me was the fear you get from the unfamiliarity of these animals rather than the actual danger itself. Because as long as you're sensible, you plan your routes before you go out on them, you don't just wander into vast areas of countryside in Australia, you'll be safe. But if you do anything silly, like going up to a dingo and trying to give it a pat, then yes, it's a wild animal, it probably will hurt you. But now you know about how to be more safe here in Australia, go watch this video here all about the 10 driving rules that tourists always break when they get here for the first time. Go watch that so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. I'll see you over there. Thanks for watching to the end. Bye.